Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to have you here all in person after 2 years of virtual meetings. I'd like to welcome you. Okay. I'd like to welcome you to this very important global platform on the decades of startup companies. It's a privilege to be here with so many distinguished figures as we plot a new course for the future of space travel, scientific research, sustainable growth, and human progress. From the future of travel and the next frontier of business innovation to creating a regulatory environment that promotes long-term sustainability, today's forum will serve as a platform to explore areas of mutual interest. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to address all of you here today at the 72nd International Astronomical Congress, which is being held for the first time in Dubai. It's a proud occasion for the United Arab Emirates that reflects a continued commitment to bringing the world together and creating a new era of cooperation and collaboration. As we continue to strengthen global ties and build bridges between the public and private sector, this forum will serve as a platform to create new business and investment opportunities and promote the exchange of knowledge and ideas. Unlocking commercial opportunities in the rapidly expanding space economy will help to inspire future generations and encourage youth to explore careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's our firm belief that space represents the next frontier for business innovation and investment. There are promising opportunities for significant growth across technology, science, tourism, manufacturing, and many aspects of the fourth industrial revolution. Momentum is growing in many fields, and that potential role for the private sector can play in the future is eminent. I look forward to reinforcing partnerships and establishing new opportunities as we accelerate efforts to create a sustainable future. This falls in line with the UAE's vision to create an attractive, competitive, and knowledge-driven economy for the next 50 years of human progress. On that note, I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation to everyone here for their hard work, dedication, and commitment. For more than 7 decades, IAC has served as a vital platform to bring the world's foremost astronauts, scientists, policymakers, and business leaders together. Once again, it's very good to see all of you here in person. Thank you very much for making this event a great success.
His Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So welcome to the pitch competition of our joint competition, startup competition, and today I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce to you the winners of this competition, the ISA competition and the UAE one. I would like to start by introducing you the winner of the ISA competition, that is the Mr. Riccardo Marchetto, CEO of Cosmic. And also then we will move immediately to the other winner, that is Mr. Mustafa Al-Musawa Al-Sawani, that is the CEO of Eagle Eye 71. So the company Cosmic SRL uses cosmic ray technology to detect water leaks. The company is working on its neutron detector-based concept to make a low-cost device. You will hear more details now. This device is capable to measure water content in the ground around the pipelines and detect water leaks. And Eagle Eye 71 is a platform that brings entities enhanced usage of satellite imagery through artificial intelligence, and this has been supported through the incubation program UAE SA run through Crypto Labs. So without any further hesitation, I would like to invite now the 2 speakers on the podium to make their own pitch.
Thank you, Luca. Good morning. I'm Riccardo Marchetto, the CEO and the founder of Cosmic. It is a new startup that uses Cosmic Rays technology for the water leaks detection. If please, you can display the presentation. Okay. Next, please. Okay, we face the problem of water leaks because the average in the world is over the 30% of the water is lost during the transport between the aqueduct and the final user. Next, please. Okay, it's not only Italian problem, but it's a worldwide problem. And next. Okay. And this is due to two main problems. The age of the pipeline, that they have over 50 years, and the difficulty to hear the noise of the sound leaks with the standard solution. Next. Yet in the 2015, with another ESA incubated startup, we found the water leaks using satellite image. And we continue to develop space-derived technology till last year with Cosmic Rays. Next. What are Cosmic Rays? They are particles from space. There are neutron, alpha, beta, and gamma particle, and also the neutrons. Oh, thank you. Okay. We choose the neutrons because there is a well-known correlation between neutron and soil moisture. Okay, and also ESA and Roscosmos in the trace gas orbiter create a neutron detector to find the water under the surface of Mars with this kind of technology. We use the scintillator technology. When a neutron particle passes over a dragged lithium probe, it creates a flash, and we count the number of neutrons in a time unit. We decided to create this contactless solution installed on a vehicle, and so we pass from 5 km a day to 50 km hour. With at the base is the counting of the neutron. Okay, so simply driving a car for the special operator is very easy to see the number of neutrons on indicator and identify immediately the leak. This is the first version of our device. In the left part, there are the CPU, the power supply, etc. module. In the right part, there is the neutron detector. This is the system architecture, so a CPU with a data logger, and all the data are sent to a data elaboration server for a machine learning algorithm interface. This is the first step outside the laboratory with a hand-pulled trolley. Okay, we need it for the calibration with a low speed. And this is the second version, installing the device on the trunk of the vehicle. We create also this application, and when the vehicle is over the water leaks, you have a neutron count decrease of the neutron counting. You can see immediately the soil moisture in the subsoil. Okay, this is what is a water leaks. This is a standard water leaks in the urban area. Okay. In only 1 year of activities, even it was an experimental technology, it was well accepted by the operator, and so the Italian major operator tried this technology over 5,000 kilometers in the pipeline network. The second step is to decrease the cost using a third-party service yet running, because for a waste collector. So we install a lot of device in the waste collector truck, And so we can have a near real-time application because daily we have more pass of the same area and all the day. So this decreases the cost of water leaks detection from over 100 euros per kilometer to few euros per kilometer. The second application, the neutron detector work well with hydrogen, so we can also detect oil leaks, okay, because you know hydrocarbons are a long chain of carbon and hydrogen. This is how we divided the prize of as a startup competition, and a big part was in the application field because there's no other application like this. Okay, I thank you to you for attention, also to my team, and Luca Del Monte and Sandra Vogt for this year of support. Thank you.
So the next winner on the podium, Mr. Mustafa Al-Musawa Al-Hazimi. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Mustafa Al-Hashimi. I'm the founder of the startup Eagle Eye. What we do actually, as you see in this pilot project, we extract objects and information from the satellite imagery. This is a pilot project that we have made in Abu Dhabi, in Yas Island. Out of the 30 centimeter resolution image, we train the model, and for example here, this is the building. And we test the model and we fine tune the model. Then we do the extraction at scale. And that's the beauty of this wonderful opportunity that gives the local authorities insight and big understanding out of the big data, so they can, as you see here, you do it in scale using the cloud computing. Another example of detecting the cars from the image, for example, to see what is the recovery rate now after COVID-19 as a use case. Once you extract this information quantitatively and qualitatively, you get it vectorized and you get it streamlined in the business processes. That's saving about 99% of the time and of the effort of. So the 5 components of getting insight, the remote sensing data, the cloud computing, the algorithm and the tools and the programmers are high. The maturity is very high. And this is what we do as Eagle Eye 71. Our team has long experience working with the government, more than 25 years. And that's an advantage when you become a solution user, and then you become a solution provider. And that's what we are business to government, where the government sectors, they want the big understanding, they want the insight to be more effective. For example, the municipalities are working in the city limit, but in high resolution, how to manage the city. And then the ministries, they work in the country level, and this is also applicable to the region level, because the data that extracted is too big a scale and covers many of the sectors that align with the SDGs of the United Nations. So after graduating from the wonderful US Space Innovation Program from US Space Agency and BRC, we worked and we identified and verified use cases. For example, like the agriculture, the vegetation health, the sand dune movement in the railways and the roads is important. Oil spills and how to monitor all of these marines and environmental development. Abu Dhabi and Dubai, among the fastest growing cities in the world. We can come from the archive and get out all of the statistics, and we can build up the trend for the future. Disaster recovery, how we become proactive, preventive, before, during, after, the crisis, rainfall. The municipalities of extracting the building, there have many use cases. Updating the base map, enforcing the law, understanding what are, all of these construction permit. Power generations are heating the water. So we don't have to put sensors here. The pixel, the wonderful pixel is a sensor. It has the optical band for the shape and then but we cannot work alone. We are working very well in an ecosystem with the data suppliers, with the organizers, with the tool, AI tool developers, and the most important thing is the human factor. We are working closely with our local universities and college, because one of the components is who will be writing that code, who will be writing that algorithm, who will be understanding the output from this extracted data. And that's why we are very proud. One of the fruit of the graduation of this program is we have trained 28 graduate students in 18 months, and every one of them at Hub 71, and we thank Hub 71 for providing the space in Abu Dhabi. Every one of them has spent 8 weeks, so they are not only ready now, they are competitive. So as you see here, for every use case, we have more than 20 use cases. There is a methodology. We look at the use case, we select the right image for the use case as far as the resolution, as far as the, then we clean it, we rectify it, we run it through the model, we extract the model, then we extract the data, convert raster to data, then we do the change detection. This is, for example, one of the examples, for example, a question, how many palm trees in UAE? We will not go and count them down. Having the right image, get the wonderful insight, not only how many, but how many of them are healthy, how many of them, so this wonderful space, Earth observation in the downstream are unlocking unlimited opportunities that are not available before. For example, look at the vegetation, the crops, the farms, food security, even monitoring the farms that are outside. This is a wonderful, successful pilot project. We have managed to extract the cars from 50 centimeters, and imagine the accuracy is 97%. So that means we did not, not many cars. So at the end, what is the recommendation and our ask? We are asking all partners from the government and from the investors to come and join us and realize and start with these use cases and start with a pilot project. We see every use case, one of these is a promising best practice and a promising UAE-made product. And this is what our leaders are looking to have our nation, not based on the oil economy, but based on innovation and in knowledge. So we have to start super fast, and we are more than happy to work in the collaboration of the ecosystem to add value to the world. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Any questions?
So I would like now to invite Mrs. Geraldine Najah, the director, ISA Director for Commercialization, Industry and Procurement, to take the floor for the award ceremony.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it is my pleasure to be here and especially to deliver this award speech. During the last years, startup companies in space have started to play a major role in the industrial space ecosystem. And ESA, like many other space agencies, understands this increasing role within the new space environment and understands also that the presence of the startups offers many perspectives for commercial undertakings. Indeed, our Director General in his Agenda 25 has identified commercialization as being a key priority for ESA for the years to come, and hence the setup of this new directorate dedicated to commercialization, industry, and procurement. And for this reason, ESA gave the title to this GNF, the title 2020's, the Decade of Startup Companies. It is a strong sign of our commitment to support startup companies and mostly to support the innovation and the dynamism that comes with startup companies. We believe that startups, that SMEs, are an asset to the whole industrial ecosystem. And as you well know, early 2020, ESA launched a competition for the best startup companies, and we have received 101 proposals from all of our member states. After a first review of these proposals, we down-selected the number to 50. Then we set up an ESA review team made up of 8 senior experts of ESA, plus the ESA Inspector General, and we reviewed and selected the top 10. And finally, our member states, through the Industrial Policy Committee of ESA, selected the top 3 proposals. And today, it is my pleasure to present to you, well, not to present, because he already presented himself, of course, with the excellent presentation that he made, but to award the winner, Mr. Riccardo Marchetto, who is the CEO of COSMIC, and which you have just listened to. And there I would like to say a few words. I think that the idea of Riccardo is extremely ingenious. It's a very smart idea, but it's also simple to use. And I think that's what makes the great innovation. It's extremely intelligent and at the same time simple to use. It uses, as you have heard, cosmic ray technology to detect water leaks. So it is a neutron detector that makes a low-cost device, easy to install on vehicles, for instance, waste trucks, as he has shown. And this measures the water content of the ground around pipelines, and this allows to identify leaks. And I understand that already over 5,400 kilometers of pipelines are already equipped with this technology, so already a very promising start. Furthermore, I think we all know that water is essential to life on Earth, but the waste of water should be avoided to the maximum extent. And we know that a large majority of our water is wasted. We see it in farming, and by the way, we had another SME startup that was working on this subject. And I think there again, we see that space provides a solution. We know that space provides solutions to many of our earthly challenges, environmental monitoring, for instance. But for the use of resources, the sustainable use of resources, this is a very important part of our future on Earth, and there again, space provides a solution. So I'm therefore extremely pleased to announce that COSMIC has won the ESA competition, and I would like to wish Riccardo Marchetto great success with the commercialization of his technology, but also the extension of his technology to oil leaks, as he has explained, because there again, it's an extremely promising technology. Congratulations, Riccardo.
So let me now introduce you the panel of, now we have a panel discussion, and I think that we have on our side Mr. Nicola Sasanelli from the Andy Thomas Foundation in Australia. So you're going to start the panel now, huh? No? There is a photo session first? Another speech?
Yeah, award speech.
Ah, okay. So, please, sorry. Sorry, before the panel will start, please, we have the other startup now that is coming for the speech. Yeah. Mr. Ibrahim Al-Kazim to make the speech. No?
Does it work? Yes, very good, sorry. Let's say the award speech will be given by Ibrahim Al-Qasim to Mr. Mustafa at another occasion. So let's say this is, we go now to the introduction of the panel. Let's say we've got 4 distinguished panelists, and I'm very pleased to introduce them. Let's say I would like to start with Nicola Salsanelli. Nicola Salsanelli has held multiple positions inside the institutional R&D locations. He's a director of the Space Industry Center, and he's also an adjunct professor at the University of South Wales. Recently, Nicola has taken on board the responsibility of CEO of the Andes Thomas Space Foundation. And of course, the Andes Thomas Space Foundation is very much interested in the results of this week because they applied to host the IAC in 2024. So cross the fingers for Nicola. Next to me is Oren Milstein. Oren is the CEO of Stemrad, who was, and perhaps let's say to a certain extent still is, a startup in Israel, but with an experienced startup with facilities in Tel Aviv and in Tampa in the United States, in Florida. And the company has been specialized in personal protective equipment, linked also to the nuclear disaster in Japan, where you've created a very interesting vest. And that's the funny thing, let's say, of your company. It's a spin-in. So let's say what you've developed for terrestrial purposes will now come to be used on SpaceX. So this is really, I think it's a big success. Oren also, in this discussion of today, would represent the points of view of the Israeli Space Agency. So there has been the coordination on that one. And the same applies to Nicola as far as the Australian Space Agency. Then we have Abdullah Al-Marar, manages the space project section at United Arab Emirates Space Agency. He has been involved in multiple missions. And as far as program requirements and objectives. And I think that one of the major achievements has also been the Mars probe HOPE, which has been launched last year and which is now having a tremendous success around Mars with all the measurements taken. But also, let's say, recently you're involved in a very interesting CubeSat project, let's say here for the observations in this region. Then I would like to introduce Geraldine. Geraldine has got a very long career inside ESA, spanning over more than 3 decades. Started as a payload operations at the International Space Station. Has thereafter occupied various managerial strategic positions inside ESA. And was until last week shown into the program as being the acting director of ESA for commercialization, industry and procurement. And this acting can now be deleted because Geraldine has been nominated as director of commercialization and procurement. And I think, let's say, this is congratulations, Geraldine. Geraldine explained during her award speech how important commercialization is for ESA, and I think this is also the focus of today's in this agenda. Last but not least, Geraldine has been my last boss, and let's say so that's why I was also very pleased, let's say, to make this introduction station, because in Holland they say you never forget your first love and your last boss. So let's say this is so let's say this is very good. Finally, Luca. Luca has been shown as the head of the industrial policy and SME division of ESA, but has also moved on to higher evaluations, and let's say is now the acting department head for industrial policy and the auditing department of ESA. Many years of experience inside for the development of a globally competitive and sustainable space industry, with many peer reviews have taken place. And Luca has presented the winner of the ESA competition held in 2020, and would also make the closing address for this special GNF session. So this GNF session is comprised of a panel discussion, but we would also like to solicit the participation of the audience. So that's why we would have the Slido tool, which will now be presented and explained by Sandra Vogt, and let's say who will encourage everybody to really use your mobile to answer the questions. And
exactly.
Off
So
to you,
the mobile
Ms.
phone
Andre.
is a very essential part at this point of the presentation. So we're using the slider tool. You might already be familiar with this in the context of other presentations that you've followed. We would kindly ask you to take out your phone to log into slider.com and to enter the code. You will see 4 questions that we have prepared for you, and we would kindly ask you to fill them in. And then our distinguished panel members will answer them one by one and have an exchange of views with all of you. Thank you very much. So if you can take some time to log in and please respond to all 4 questions.
Yeah, so the first question which you see on your mobile is posing the following point. That the startup competitions are all facing different problems. And please share your views on what you consider being the most important problems for the startup companies. And there you see on your mobile that you have got 4 options. And we would really like to ask everybody to put their options, and then the results will be shown on the screen.
On the screen. So we hope that you can all find the questions. You should have 4 answers. And I see that many of you have already taken out your phones and are busy. This is very good news. We will give you about 30 seconds to complete the survey. I see some of you are already ready. So I would say maybe another 10 seconds. And then we will close the poll for the first question and look at the results. Right, Karina, I think we can close the poll now for question number 1. Thank you very much.
Is it closed? Do we also see the number of people who having voted? And can we also see them on the retro screens over here, please? So it seems to be clear, let's say, that to obtain funding from the investors is definitely the one which is being selected the most by the audience. And I would like to ask Abdullah, let's say that whether you share this point of view, and what is your experience inside the UAE Space Agency in connection with your startups?
Sure. First of all, thank you for this opportunity on behalf of the UAE Space Agency to participate in this distinguished panel. So moving on to the question, in terms of challenges for startups, I would say there's I think an answer that probably was not up there, and it's also based on some of our experience with the startups that we have here in the UAE, and it's basically I'd probably call it access to market, and specifically here in the UAE, what we tend to do, especially with startups, is to try to connect them with actual sectors within the UAE, not specifically space sector, because at the end of the day, the startup can be also of benefit to other sectors, and that's what we also focus on in terms of spillover, but also in terms of benefiting other sectors using space data. And what we found a big challenge through that is the fact that most of these sectors, or a lot of these sectors, do not really take the startups seriously and do not venture in terms of using their products, and they tend to choose more reliable companies and more reliable solutions. And therefore, what we're trying to do in regards to that challenge is that at the end of the day, you'd want to create some kind of a pilot testing for these solutions that are provided by these startups, and you would want to do it in collaboration with the relevant sectors. and governments and entities. And so we did start this solution where we launched very recently a program, but that was really focused on downstream applications and value-added services, where we called for a proposal to startups and SMEs, such that two themes were highlighted, and these themes were very close to some of the SDGs that are identified by the UN, and they are food security and climate change. And based on that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to de-risk this challenge by financing these solutions and pilot tests to prove to these entities that these startups have solutions that can contribute to your challenges. And so by that, we're trying to solve that market access problem or challenge that we see and we experience, to be honest, with our startups here in the UAE, with the potential end users and potential sectors that can be long-term users and long-term clients and customers to these startups.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. Let's see, could we now move on to the second question, the results?
Yes, so for all
So the second question was, how can the space agencies help to create a healthy ecosystem for startups? And there, the views are a bit more shared. Because we had 4 options, and the lowest one is the support to access markets. So this possibly means that for the startup, an export market will be too early stage, but let's say there's 2 equal now at the moment: promote business-to-business opportunity for startups and provide a predictable in-orbit demonstration validation opportunities. Geraldine, what is your view on the view of the audience and from your own perspective within ESA?
So, first of all, from my own perspective, I myself voted. I know that votes are secret, but I voted for the IOD, IOV opportunities. But I must say, with hesitation, with B2B opportunities for startup companies. So, okay, what I can say is, of course, as in the previous question, I think all the answers are valid, first of all, and they are all covering important aspects. B2B opportunities for startups, indeed, and that's what we try to do with events such as the Industry Space Days, where we really help our startups and SMEs to make known what they do, their products, their competences, and I think this is really something where we, the space agencies and the public sector, can help. IOD, IOV is for me essential because in many cases, and you mentioned it, Abdullah, newcomer industry, be they SMEs or startups, find themselves confronted with the so-called lack of background, of experience. So when they want to compete for contracts with within a space agency, they are, of course, let's say, facing a competition which is hard for them because they come against established traditional industries which have the background and experience. So it is also our duty to help a more level playing field and also to help them demonstrate and validate their products and concepts. And what I can say about ESA and how we plan to promote a healthy ecosystem for startups, we plan to work on 3 lines of action. So first is innovation, so that is help the startups go along with their innovation and their ideas. If needed, provide them access to expertise, facilities, but also provide them access to IOD, IOV to test their ideas. Then, of course, access to funding. It has been said before. I think the previous question was clearly obtain funding from investors. And that's why when it said promote contacts with investor community, this is also a role where we can help the startups find access to funding, partnerships with investment funds or VC. And third point on which we want to work is speed. Because it is true that the pace of startups and their time horizon are quite different from those of established space agencies. For us, placing a contract within 5-6 months is normal business. For a startup, it can be a matter of life or death if they don't get a contract within 1 month. So we have to work also on being much more reactive and accelerating the pace at which we work, which is, by the way, a good thing for all our activities, I think. So these are the points on which we are working.
Thank you, Geraldine. We've got now the third question. And the third question is about the share of the budget which should be earmarked for startups as part of the major space infrastructure programs by the public procurement authorities. Should there be a percentage dedicated, and if so, how should this be managed? And again, 4 options. I think we've got 60 votes. I see now on the top left. Perhaps there are more people inside the audience, so you can still vote if you so wish. But I don't think it will change the result because I see 61 at the top, but you are faster, Geraldine. That's without any doubt. The result is that it should be managed by the procuring space agency, and perhaps that's Oren, you can share your point of view from your own perspective, but also from the Israeli Space Agency.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really not surprised by this answer. Only 8% think that startups should not get funded. So, you know, the publicly identifies with the entrepreneur in his quest to success. And I think rightfully so. The founder of a startup will do really everything necessary for the success of his company or her company, even sometimes going without salary for many months. Really, the level of commitment is really unrivaled in the industry. Additionally, startups are very flexible and are able to adapt on the go to changing circumstances. I think a good example is my company, STEMRAD. We were really focused on the nuclear industry with our gamma radiation solution protection. When we stumbled upon really a plea to the public by NASA to come up with the radiation protection for their astronauts in deep space going back to the moon and onto Mars. I was fast to locate 2 VPs of Lockheed Martin visiting Israel. This is back in 2015. And I basically almost barged into a meeting to sit with them. And I gave my 10-minute spiel about how we can adapt our nuclear solution for use on the way to Mars. It sounds pretty far-fetched, but they liked it. They were flexible enough to basically say, you have a partner. And then we went on to formulate a collaboration that's been ongoing for 6 years now. We're now within Lockheed Martin's booth with this product. This is an example of what, we were like a 4-person company when I did that. Okay, so this would not happen in a big traditional environment. So to put a little bit of money in a start, it'll grow big. It's like a seed that will grow into a sequoia tree. So other than that, yeah, I just want to say how excited I am to be here. I'm from Israel. So only a year ago, I thought I'd be coming on my US passport. But now I arrived on my Israeli passport. It's a sense of great pride to be here. I feel very connected to this place, and I thank you for your hospitality.
As a matter of fact, just to reply to that, it's our pleasure. Not only that, but maybe just days ago, last week, we signed an MOU with the Israeli Space Agency and 2 LOIs, which are specific, one to Bershit lunar lander, and the other to what we call the Space Analytics Working Group. So it's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful. Shall we move on? Yeah, I think this is an... Shall we move on to the fourth question? And whether it was simple, because there were only 2 answers, and that's why we've got now a record number of 65 votes. And this startup will not have a clear overview of their competitors. So what should be the coordinating role of the agencies? And there were 2 options. Yes, it would be good, let's say, to have this coordinating roles of the agency with publishing a roadmap on ongoing technology. Or no, let's say that the risk that the startup, that their initiative would be copied by their competitors. Now, I believe, let's say, that the risk has been lower rated than the positive aspect of public space sector publishing such a roadmap to support the decision-making process in the startup companies. And Australia has got an enormous amount of startup companies, let's say, in many sectors, but also in space. And perhaps, Nicola, you could share your point of view from the Australian perspective, and also having been the director of a firm yourself. It's,
Thank you, Peter. Yes, we are quite young, and the Space Agency was established, as you know, in 2018. But before that, some state they start to publish strategies, and one of the major activity in the strategy, I'm talking for example, for the South Australian government, was this industrial capability roadmap or directory, and that is quite important because it is relevant to the first, the first topic. The government, federal or state, have to take care in particular about the networking. And, the first question was, promote B2B as an important aspect. So the capability directory or industrial directory was really an attractive tools. And that is for 2 important directions. One is to stimulate the vibrant ecosystem, and that is at national level. And the other is also to promote a sort of international engagement, because we know clearly the ecosystem, and that is not just startups, but also prime industry and also end user, because you talk about the downstream, so the space have to be engaged in also in the traditional industry. So on the capability directory, industrial directory, that was an idea from the government, a support from the government, was exactly this: a list of company with contact point, unique selling point, and of course the profile, the company profile. That was so important because they create a sort of reciprocal interest, and also find the way for some startup to locate themselves and be involved in the supply chain. That is quite important. What also we did, and it is quite exceptional, because if you go around the world, you can see an annual event. We did every 6 months an event, and still now, the Australian Space Forum, that it's very simple. It's 1 day short. A panel, 3 panels, plus international policy trend, but also an exhibition area. Very economic, because for example, that is, the contributor of the government is pay half for the startup, and instead, for the normal organization, the full price. But for example, we talk about 1,000 euros. That is not a lot of money. But there is an important B2B, important networking event. So the rule of the government is exactly in this direction. So I'm completely comfortable with this answer.
Thank you, Nicola. Very interesting observations. Sandra, you would like to say something on the Slido tool, the next stage?
Absolutely. So we would like to inform you that, of course, it is possible to direct open questions at our distinguished panel members. If you log into the Slido tool, you will find a function where this is possible, and we invite you to send your questions, which might be addressed later on in the session. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now we come to to a few questions which may have been partly addressed already, but if not, let's say the panelists will feel free to put some additional explanation. And the first one I would like to ask to Abdullah, and this deals with if there is a dedicated policy at the UAE Space Agency in support of startups. Could you explain a little bit more about this policy, and what do you still see? Is there room for improvement of this policy, or when will such a policy be finalized? If you could share your short views on this one, because we're running a bit out of time.
Sure. So again, thank you for the question. Now, in terms of policy, of course, the straight answer is yes. However, I'll give a bit of context to that. Now, a policy normally, to put an effective policy in place, you'd want I would say, encouraging environment. So I want to touch upon that, to be honest. And when I say environment, I mean there is support for startups and SMEs throughout the chain, starting from the leadership. Now, there is full support from the leadership, and that's very evident through what we see today. So we have a minister who's dedicated to entrepreneurship and SMEs. And then we have the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technologies, where they identify space as a separate pillar, which they encourage. In addition to that, of course, we all know that the UAE in general is moving to a knowledge-based economy. So with all of that, what I'm trying to say is that there is a policy, but pushing that policy, there's that environment that's encouraging that policy. I wouldn't say enforcing it, but very much encouraging it. And so, of course, if we come to the policies, not only the policies, but initiatives came out of these policies. So, as an example, of course, we had 2 cohorts of new space innovations programs. And the first one, we had 2 startups that graduated. The second one, more than 4. And as a matter of fact, today, Eagle Eye, Mustafa, is one of the graduates from the second cohort. So not only the policy, but there are initiatives that are in place. And of course, now continuing that journey, as I mentioned, we are trying to, as I tried to touch upon, and maybe my colleagues also touched upon, the fact that you need to validate these startups and their solutions to the end users. And that's what we're doing through the program that was just launched recently.
So from an Australian perspective, Nicolas, let's say opportunities for startup companies. How do you see them that their opportunities would increase, either in the public, for public sector programs, or the commercial programs? Where do you see these things to move through?
Definitely is a private sector. I completely agree with Abdullah. So the downstream is very important in Australia. In Australia, we have more or less 1.4 million companies, organizations, that is relevant to the space. So if the space-based technology could be assist this company, we talk about farmer, mining, transport, construction, if they can be involved in order to become more competitive through the space-based technology, we have a huge activity for the startup. And the startup, different of primary company, they are very agile, they are very flexible. They can speak the language of the farmer, or speak the language of the builder. So it's more flexible. And as you know, if the downstream is pushed, the upstream is followed because they need. And the upstream is a totally different category because they are deep technology. So what does mean this? That they need more runaway to reach, the TLR goal. So they need more assistance. So we need to be more close to them. And this is why in Australia we try to do with the Cooperative Research Center is a sort of consortium that is created a sort of pool called Aurora of 65 startups in the space sector. And what Aurora does is just share R&D that is developed by the research center with the startup, allow them to, in some way, use this R&D and answer to the need of the end user. That is quite important. So in that case, the public or the government is assist them not with cash or program, because in Australia the startup is looking for the investors and also the consumer or the end user. But what we try to do is facilitate this process.
And this Aurora is an activity from the Australian Space Agency, or?
That's right. Also, the space agencies has embarked on this strategy. So also on the website of the Australian Space Agency, there is this capability directory. So easy to identify who are what. And in some way, if I need, for example, there are important tender, in particular in the defense sector, and they need to involve, Australian company. So that it's easy in some way to identify company that can assist in that particular payload on their particular subsystem. So it's quite important, but again, the role of the government is facilitated.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Now, let's say what we have here on the stage is, let's say, space agencies or representative of space agencies, where you see a major increase in the startup companies. And this is also particularly relevant for Israel, Oren. Could you explain, let's say, this, let's say, not unprecedented, but let's say quite remarkable increase in the space startup companies inside Israel?
Right, no, with pleasure. So, Israel is a startup nation, so it's not so surprising. But given that we've had this space infrastructure for many years, Israel was one of the first countries to launch a satellite independently into space back in the 80s. So the know-how was already there. It was never bled into the innovation or startup industry as it has in the past few years. What happened in the past few years? We had a combination of factors. We had the Israeli Space Agency actively supporting startups, like our startup, like STEMRAD, and that was amazing. And on top of that, we've had the heritage of the past astronaut Ilan Ramon that was transformed into the Ramon Foundation to commemorate him, but also to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship within the space industry in Israel. So it's a whole accumulation of factors which happily is resulting today in an unprecedented vibe towards creating startups for this crucial industry. Yeah.
Let's say yesterday, let's say at the speech of when the award speech, Geraldine, let's say the ESA Director General was also asked by startups on, let's say, what can space agents do? We're having major test facilities, laboratories, software test beds, expertise in-house. How can these be made available towards the startups to help them, possibly by making available their expertise or making use of the facilities at marginal costing? Let's say, what is the role of ESA in this sort of the direction?
Yes, Peter, actually you're right. Indeed, it has been mentioned by our Director General, and also we made a little survey among startups, European startups, to understand better how ESA could best help them and what we could do. And certainly, what came first was what they call the ESA stamp. So the fact that hopefully ESA is a guarantee of quality, of trust, and therefore it is good. I mean, contracts with ESA are a guarantee. They can go to the bank and show it can get them better loans, etc. But also the expertise of ESA, the knowledge and the facilities. That is absolutely true. And yes, we already do that. We have business incubation center network. And when we incubate startups, we provide them a certain number of hours of technical expertise. I think we should also, by the way, provide business expertise sometimes, or support, for instance, to the market assessment. And we have been discussing with the director of our technical center, Estek. He is totally willing to grant access to the ESA test facilities for free, even for the startups incubated in our BICs. But of course, as you well know, the problem with our test facilities is that they are quite busy. But nevertheless, we can always identify the slots when they are not in use and certainly provide free access. What has been mentioned already is the connection with the investors, so I don't want to come back to it. I think there is another aspect on which we can provide expertise and knowledge is with regard to patents. We have a patents office, and usually the startups, I mean, they have an idea, a concept, and they have to protect this because it is their wealth, it's their capital, really. And I think it's quite important that we can give them the expertise on how they can protect their invention in the best possible way. So yes, there is a range of ways in which we can provide expertise and support.
And possibly also because of the competition of 2020, it also included the mentor package for the 3 winners. No, it's let's say as a prime example. Yeah. Oren, you are a very successful startup. So let's say there may be many startups here, let's say in the audience. If you would give your 3 most important recommendations, which they have to take into account, which will be them?
Yeah, so with pleasure. I see it as, you know, part of my commitment to give this know-how and experience that I've had over the years. We've been around for 10 years, so I have quite a lot of experience. And I can say that with regards to working in space, it's fantastic, it's exciting, but try to diversify into having an earthbound solution. And this is so that you have ongoing revenue while achieving your long-term vision of going to the moon, going to Mars. Don't ignore the need for that short-term revenue to build confidence within your investor community. Not all the investors are willing to wait 10 years. Okay, so if you have something quicker, even though it's not your primary focus, it's important to show, don't overlook that. And also diversify your client portfolio. I would focus also on government, but also on the private space sector. I wouldn't focus solely on one of the two. In STEMRAD, basically, we've had you know, the opportunity to begin with an earthbound solution for nuclear industry. And then that actually spun in, as you said, into the space industry. But since then, we also developed a medical product that very much is inspired by the space product. So we're able to basically diversify into 3 different market verticals. And this provides, you know, a lot of confidence and short-term revenue towards achieving, you know, the long-term goal of the company. So really diversify, and you know, focus not only on the long term but also on the short term.
It's an important part for for startups, and I think this has already been mentioned, is this business incubation centers. And Geraldine, you have inherited, let's say, as from last week, I believe you have inherited 23, 24, 25, and still growing numbers of business incubation centers. It has been a massive success. How do you rate this success? Let's say, what is the prime objective, and how do you see the plans to expand this even further?
Yes, we do have this very successful business incubation center network. It's called the Space Solutions Network, with the idea that space provides solutions to many challenges. Okay, a first indication, KPI to rate the success of the BICs is that if you take the 2020 and 21 winners of the competition, I've counted 3 of them who were incubated in one of our BICs in Lazio, Bavaria, and the Netherlands. So it's a first indication of success. We have 1 BIC per member state, basically, across locations. I think we have incubated some 1,200 startups, quite high survival rate. Actually, the survival rate is almost worrying because they are almost too successful, if you see what I mean. I mean, it is expected that some should fail as well. But no, we have a very successful big program, the Business Incubation Center. What I think is that now we have achieved this very good repartition across Europe of our centers, and that's really a success as such for our member states. But now we have to perhaps evolve. We have this network on which we can build. But as you know, and as I'm sure many startups know even much better than I do, is that the initial funding is relatively easy to find, the seed funding, at least in Europe, and I'm sure in all the other space powers, you find the seed funding. The second rounds are more difficult, the scale-up. And for there, you don't need business incubation anymore. You really need accelerators, and you need much more substantial effort, but more focused also. So I think now that we have this business incubation centers network, we have to go to the next step, the scale-up. Perhaps we should reflect whether we should also work on accelerators at European level. There are already some, but should ESA maybe look at this? Certainly support the scale-up, and as I say, perhaps focus more, and also focus on the startups of interest to ESA. Because right now we have a wide range of competences which have been incubated. Not all of them are of interest to space activities, by the way. I think ESA, we are a public space agency managing public money for developing space activities. Let's look in all these startups that we have incubated, those which we could really use in our projects, and perhaps also that our primes would like to use in their supply chain. I think this is a potential evolution. And I would like to mention the particular case of ESRIC. You know, it is the European Space Resources Innovation Center. It is based in Luxembourg. It is a kind of a special business incubation because it is, first of all, focused on space resources, and also it covers the end-to-end from pre-incubation to post-incubation and acceleration. And I think this is an interesting model to look at for the evolution of our BICs as well.
That's very interesting. So then we come to another point, which is with Nicola. Let's say from the Australian perspective, many ways, different ways are possible to provide support to the startups. What we already said, making available in-kind services, making available test facilities, free publicity at major conferences, arranging the B2B, B2G events. How is this done in Australia? What active policy do you envisage or do you have in place?
Yes, you know, as I said before, in Australia, startups are looking for their private investors and the commercial customer. But what the government is doing is assist them indirectly. So, for example, there are a couple of projects that is from the Space Agency. One is infrastructure fund. That means that you know, there is a network of facility around the country where there is a test facility where the startup can access. And that is facilitated by the Space Agency with a voucher. So we can provide a voucher to the startup to access to, for example, the anechoic chamber or vibrant test facility. So that is not, they don't need to have the test facility at home, but they can use a national center. And the same is another important program from the Space Agency was the International Engagement Project. So we stimulate the startup to engage internationally in order to present some project. One of these is, for example, Spirits, that is involved also the European Union, Italian Space Agency, University of Melbourne, and a couple of CTAIL, that is a medium company, but also Innovor and Human Space that really are startups. So, we try to stimulate, to be aggregated in some project. But, what, was quite important what Geraldine said before. What we did a couple of years ago was, because the issue is also how you can generate a startup, because startup is not coming, in this way. So, yes, of course, we can stimulate universities, spin-off, etc. But what we did was Innovation Fund 2-3 years ago, where we have 3 different programs. One is a scholarship. So what we did is $20,000 for each student that want to travel the world, spend 6 months in ESA, space 6 months in NASA, or 3 months Thales Alenia Space, or period of time in Toulouse. And then we give the money, and it's 1-year program. When they come back, they can come with some idea. And when they come with this idea, we are ready to provide them a sort of platform that we call incubator center. So there are 4, 5, 6 maximum per year of startup that is located in the incubator center. And they do for 1 year. So what does it mean? You need to have a maturity, then you have an idea, then come back. We help you on the business plan in order to find some, commercialization. And then the third program is Accelerator Program. So what does it mean? We create a sort of network of investors that is not just in Australia, but also in USA, in North Europe. So we not only the pitch, everybody can do the pitch, but also some direct contact. We know where there are investors that are looking for money, and we know they are looking for a pool of proposals. So that was quite interesting because I love the idea of BIC. I was, when I was young, BIC was for me is quite important because it's a sort of a way of create responsibility on the single state, not only the European Space Agency, not only the EUA, but also the state and the single region. In other words, everybody can put some dollar inside in order to create this incubator. So on this model, in Australia, we drafted this activity. That is working well because we have just in one state 5, 6 startups per year. So this is the process.
This is a very interesting concept that you give. This, if I understood it correctly, $20,000, let's say, for persons to travel around and let's say and to collect IDs. It's very funny because also at the start of ESRO, let's say, if I recall it well, let's say people were sent from ESRO were sent to the States, and just to go there, let's say, to see what is going on into the US space activity, which was booming at that time, and to come up with IDs, let's say, for the early days of ESRO. A further question, let's say this is, like Oren said, this is also my first time in Dubai, and you see here the media city, you see here the internet city. Let's say there are so many different cities. It seems like Dubai is a Silicon Valley already in itself. Let's say, do you, Abdullah, let's say, do you foresee that there's also going to be a space city, let's say, where all the space companies would sit together and encourage each other and have a vibrant space city?
You got it spot on. In fact, we're doing just that. And as a matter of fact, this was announced really, again, a week ago, because the week ago it was the Space Week in Space Expo 2020. But we call it the Space Economic Zone. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish space economic zones throughout the UAE, and we're starting with Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And of course, the idea is to create the right environment, the right ecosystem for startups and SMEs to grow. Now, for that to happen, you would want to have the right mix in these space, what we call space economic zones, or if you want, the Silicon Valleys. And the idea, of course, is to have anchor clients, but also probably anchor companies, such as, very similar to what you mentioned, Geraldine, in terms of these, even these huge companies can have supply chains through these, through these startups. And so, in fact, that's what we're trying to do, and through these space economic zones, we, of course, we facilitate a number of things, sources of funding, mentorship, as well as access to facilities and infrastructure, such as testing facilities, infrastructure in terms of ground stations, access to ground stations. And so, in fact, that's what we are doing. And as I mentioned, it was really recently launched.
So it's not a space city, but it's a space economic zone. Basically, it's going to be a space city. Yeah, I think this was an extremely interesting discussion. Luca, let's say you have heard, perhaps quite a lot of similarities between the four panelists. Let's say perhaps you would.
Thanks, Peter. I would say that was very inspiring, listening to all of you and all the experience that you have reported to us today. And also, I was having a look at the questions that were arriving on Slido and about how space agencies can help. Now, I draw some conclusions out of what I heard is indeed that there are all your recommendations may be grouped in three big categories. That, by the way, I'm not inventing. It's something that have been even. For the first time, I heard this from Bezos, that was saying, what are the ingredients that you need? And basically, this is talents, and we heard about that. You mentioned this explicitly. Investments. I mean, Nicola also made this clear reference to the need to attract investors. And this is interesting that was Bezos saying that, patience. You need a lot of patience, but it's true. I mean, it took him 20 years to scale up to what Amazon is today. But at the same time, when you're a startup, you are under pressure. So you need speed. So you need patience, but at the same time, you also need speed. So when I think, I mean, being in the shoes of a space agencies, then when I think of which role can we play in support of the development of the startup ecosystem, I can think that we have several roles. Of course, we have a traditional role of procurement agency. It may or may not, depends on the situation, being adapted to a startup. Sometimes we recognize it's very difficult to have access to our type of contracts, so we have probably to lower a little bit the barriers there for entry-level type of companies. But there are other roles that we are also developing, and I'm sure that the role of acceleration, so again, time is important. Acceleration, it's very, very important, but also that of enabler, the one that we create the right conditions for the startup to let's say, grow. And in particular, one of these conditions is certainly access to capital. For me, this is one of the most important one. We are in contact nowadays, as you may know, with a lot of investors, let's say with the investor community at large, and they tell us that they want to know which are the good shot, where to invest. And we can establish this type of connection. I think this is very important. This will reassure an investor community who has certain times difficulties in understanding the business case of space. And here we have a role. We can play that role of reassuring, but also of, and this is the case of the events where we can connect through fora, through industry space days, we can connect these companies with the investors. So I think these are certain things that I draw from what I hear today as a recommendation that we could certainly implement and we need to implement in the next days. So just as a conclusion, I think that if you have found this type of conversation interesting among this very distinguished panel, you may also be interested in a sort of follow-up, because there will be this afternoon in this same room at 2:40, there will be the space startup pitch competition by the UAE Space Agency. So I warmly invite you to come back later on, because this will be very, very interesting follow-up of this discussion. And also, it's not a competition, it will be rather another round of discussion, but this time you will hear the voice of the startup, those startups that we have selected. So let's say startup that we believe are a very good one, very strong one, and it will take place tomorrow. It will be the technical session E3.6, called Economics of Procurement in Space Contracting, and this will take place in room Al-Ain A, at 2:45 tomorrow afternoon. So we will learn actually from the voice of the same startup, the journey. What does it take for this startup to grow, let's say, from being a startup, let's say, to be something different, because you don't want to stay a startup all your life, obviously. As well as like to conclude maybe again with the word of the CEO of Amazon, that you should, even if you grow as a big company one day, you should always stay in your mind with the attitude of day one. So we want to stay as a startup inside, but we want to grow inside, and here we are there to help. Thanks, Peter, and thanks distinguished audience. But also I would like to thank Sandra that's sitting there, that has been very helpful in organizing all these events. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Peter.
Yep. Thank you, Luca. So before we conclude, because we made a promise to the audience, let's say the audience could ask questions, and let's say via this Slido tool. And perhaps, let's say, we can look at one of the questions, let's say, which is the top one. We still have a few minutes left. So which percentage would you consider as an acceptable fail rate for startups? And as not every startup will make it on the market. Luca, is that something which you could, from your experience, you could indicate this? So it's the blue one on the top.
Which one, sorry?
Yeah, no, let's say this came from the public. So
Is there a role for space agency?
no, let's say the blue one on the top. So of course we want to say 0, but what's yeah?
No. It's not 0, because if it would be 0, this means that you are not trying enough. You are not innovating enough. So I don't know if there is a right figures here. You may have heard of some figures that are coming from the venture capital type of approach. There are somebody talking about a 20 to 1, a 1 to 20 ratio. I don't know. I don't believe. This is not my business. So, but it's sure that we have to think also in a portfolio type of investment. Portfolio means that you certainly invest. You support a number of startups, knowing already from the very beginning that a certain number will fail. I wouldn't say that we encourage fail, but again, I come back to the concept of time. Fails. If you have to fail fast. We don't want that we continue supporting a company when we already see that the failure is at the horizon. So again, we have to provide the framework to fail fast if we have to fail, but hopefully to succeed also very quickly.
Yeah. Good, then we also have, thanks by the way for the audience for all the questions. I think we've got a very nice one for Geraldine, yeah, let's say, which is a bit of a critical one, let's call it not a critical one.
No,
but it's
actually, I welcome the question, because it's true that there is a trend. Of course, this is the subject of today. We talk about startups, startups, startups. But let's not forget that, at least in Europe, elsewhere, the reality of the industrial sector is we have a very rich industrial sector, which goes from large primes, large system integrators. We have mid-caps, a very rich range of mid-caps, SMEs, so we have academia also. And let's not forget about that, because we should not oppose new space, old space. First of all, new space is getting old, and second, I think new space is really about an approach. And there was a question also, so when do you stop being a startup? I think, in my view, also, when we talk about the fail rate, we should think about the growth, the size. Because if a startup stays at a 2-3 person company forever, it's not what I call a real success. Of course, you want the startup to grow, and eventually it's not a startup anymore, it's a large SME, whatever. We have many examples like this. So it is really this, that also within a large company, you can have a startup approach. There are, I mean, I was talking just before this session, it is clear that in all our large system integrators in Europe, there is this approach, and you see it. The Airbus, TAS, OHB, etc., they have within the company a startup area where they enable and allow people to act differently, to take risks, to set up new activities. And this is really exciting. And by the way, it would be good if we can have that at ESA too, because I think this is extremely stimulating for the whole space sector. So it's not startups versus the rest of the world. It's a new space approach that permeates the space sector, challenges it, and brings with it innovation and dynamism.
Yeah. Very good. So we had a session planned for 1.5 hours. We should end at 12 hours and 20 minutes, which we just passed, I think, for about 3 minutes, but I hope you will excuse us. I would like to thank all the panelists, let's say, for their excellent contribution. I think it has been a very interesting session. And as Luca has mentioned, tomorrow there's going to be even another very interesting session at 2:45 in room IAA, on the, let's say, with the real life experience of the 6 startups who have won the competition, both on the side of UAE, Space Agency, and ESA. So if you have the time, let's say this is going to be the first 1.5 hours, so it's between 2:45 and 4:15, really their experience of how they came about this difficult process from the startup to a scale up. So I would like to thank the audience, let's say, for their presence, and thank you, let's say, for all the panelists. Thank you.